I was 10 years old, and it was summertime. I loved summer because it meant that I could be outside all the time. It won't surprise you to know, for me to say that I was a tomboy, and I had loved any opportunity I could for playing ball, running, swimming, climbing trees, or riding my bike. If I could do that from dawn to dusk, it was a fabulous day. And earlier in the year, my parents had decided that when my father finished school for the year, he was a school administrator, that when he had finished school, that in the summertime, we would build an addition onto our house. We were going to add a master bedroom and a bath. Well, I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be so great. I'm going to be outside all day long with my dad, with a hammer and nails and a saw. Well, the project got underway, and it didn't turn out exactly the way I had thought at 10 years old it would. My dad did actually buy me one of those belt things, Steve, whatever they're called, and I still have my own hammer, and I had my own nails, but he wisely kept me away from the saw for all kinds of reasons. Every morning I would get up, and I would put on my work clothes, and I would be ready to go outside to help my dad do the building of this new room. As I would walk toward the door, my mother from the kitchen would say, "Linda, don't forget to put your shoes on." I hated wearing shoes. I absolutely detested wearing shoes. "Don't forget to put your shoes on. There are nails all over the backyard." Well, of course you can imagine, knowing me, there was one of these days when I did not heed that warning, and yes, of course, I stepped outside and immediately stepped on a nail. I was not about to tell my mother what I had done. It really didn't hurt all that much, so I'm thinking like, no big deal. Within 3 days, it was really sore. I began to limp, which prompted the question from my mother, "Are you limping? Is there something wrong with your leg?" "Well, kinda." "Not really. Let me look at your leg." To which she took my foot and my leg in her hand. She said, "What in the world happened to you? What are these blue streaks going up your leg?" Well, that small little puncture that had not hurt very much had become very, very infected. She called the doctor. We went to our family physician. He immediately took my foot in his hand, and he lanced my foot. To this day, I can feel it. He put ointment on it, bandaged it up, gave me an antibiotic for the blood poisoning in my leg. And as I walked out the door, the office door, he said, "Linda," and knowing the kind of child I was, he said, again, "Linda, turn around and look at me." He said, "There's one more thing that you need to do to encourage the healing of that wound. I want you to go home, and for the next week, I want you to soak your foot in salt water for 45 minutes, 3 times a day." I thought, are you kidding me? How boring is that? Did you hear what I said? As I turned around, yeah, I heard what he said. And I did. I soaked my foot in that salt water, that bath. I will never forget, to this day, the effects that salt water had on the healing of that wound. He was right. It did make a difference. Perhaps that's why Jesus calls his disciples salt of the earth. He knew that they could take the healing that he offered out into the world. That they would become agents. They would be salt of the earth. They would be his agents of healing in the world. These verses that Jim just read are part of a large sermon. Chapters 5 and 6 are part of a sermon that Jesus is preaching. Had we read the verses just before this, we get the Beatitudes. And then these 3 verses are sort of a transitional verses that lead then into an ethical sort of standard for what does it mean to be a follower of Christ. How do we behave? What do we do? The audience to which Jesus is preaching is not just the new Christian community. It's actually including the people of Israel. He found himself preaching in the midst of a debate to the political and spiritual direction that the nation would take. The people of Israel had returned from exile only to be ruled by the Roman Empire. In transition, once again, they struggled to define who they were and how they were going to live out their destiny. Now, in those days, religious and political questions weren't separated. They were mingled together, and they created all kinds of heated debate. How can it be, they thought, that God's holy temple and city can be occupied territory? Where is God? And what's our relationship to this God, this holy God? Where is God? What does God want from us? How does God want us to respond when we are under rule? All of these questions caused a plethora of answers and a whole bunch of opinions all across the board. And then along comes Jesus. And he's not caught up in the politics or the spiritual argument. He simply says to them, be who you're meant to be. Be salt. Be light. Be the healing salve for a nation who has experienced too much pain and way too many losses. Be light. Be a beacon of hope. For God has not abandoned you, no matter what it may look like, and God will be with you throughout everything that you experience. And it's not only this God of history that they have known for generations. Today, before them, stands God incarnate, enfleshed in Jesus Christ, standing before them, telling them, you are salt and you are light. It is He who comes and stands before them so that they will know God's love. They will know God's compassion. They will know God's healing and God's hope. Trinity, this congregation, is in transition. I suspect that there are many questions about what's next. Not unlike the Israelites, we may be wondering, where is God in this change? Who are you as the people of God? How do you express the good news of God's kingdom? What are you willing to let go of so that something new can begin? How do you want to become? What do you want to become as you grow in the Spirit of God's grace? How are you individually and corporately salt of the earth and light to the world. I have to say that I feel a bit hypocritical talking about being the salt of the earth and the light to the world when I know my own frailties and imperfections. As a priest in this parish, I know that there have been times when my leadership style did not meet the criteria of some. I am fully aware that there have been times when it would have been better if I had delegated, if I had been more forceful, if I had been more creative, more spiritually present, had more depth and substance in my sermons. There have been circumstances when I have been pastorally inept and woefully lacking in communication. There is much in my tenure here that can be improved upon, and that, my friends, is good news. As I listened to the vestry yesterday at their workday, they have taken very seriously the feedback that you have given them and are working attentively to respond to your comments. I have full confidence that your hardworking vestry and search committee will be diligent in acting upon your remarks and your observations. The wonderful part about coming face to face with your failings is that God continues to stand before us proclaiming, in spite of all that we might feel is wrong, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light to the world. You know, there's nothing in this statement that says, oh, by the way, you're always going to get it right, and oh, you'll always be able to please everyone, or that there will never be any confusion, confrontation, or pain. That's not what this says. What Jesus is saying is, I have come within you, and you are my healing hand. You are the hope for the world. In my name. I would say to this congregation, you are the healing hand that lifts a PADS guest out of sorrow, if only for a moment. You are the light that brings hope to someone who has just lost a parent, or whose son is on drugs, or a child whose dog has just died. You are salt. You are light. Folks, if you wonder in this time of transition who you are, this is who you are. You are a healing presence to those who are dispossessed on the margins of society. You are salt of the earth as you heal one person at a time, seeking to do justice, to love mercy, respecting the dignity of every human being by being peacemakers in the name of God. You are the light and hope for the world through Jesus. You are the mirror that refracts the love that God is sharing. In your word, by what you say, by example, by what you do, you are the light of Christ in a world often dark with cynicism and despair and fear and hopelessness. I want you to notice what Jesus says and does not say. He does not say, you all can be the salt of the earth. Nor does he say, you all should be the salt of the earth. Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. In the Greek, it literally means you and you alone are the salt of the earth. It's up to you. To be salt, we do not have to be spectacular. To be salt, we do not have to be sensational. To be salt, we do not have to be successful by the world's standards. To be salt, we just have to affect our little corner of the world. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world." And we are to put our light on a lampstand so that everyone in the house can see it. You are the best person to shed light, the light of Christ, on those you meet. And those who shine the light of Christ on others by what they say or what they do are fulfilling the words that we heard from the prophet Isaiah. Share your bread with the hungry and shelter the homeless poor. Clothe the man you see to be naked and turn not from your own kin. Then will your light shine like the dawn. If you do away with the yoke, the clenched fist, the wicked word, if you give bread to the hungry and relief to the oppressed, your light will rise in the darkness. One of the offertory sentences that's in our prayer book expresses it perfectly. Let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. It's not our glory we seek. It's to enlighten the glory of our Lord. Use us, Lord, as salt and as light to bring about your kingdom in this place.